Hi everyone, I'm Anson Alexander and welcome to my beginner's tutorial for using macOS. This is actually the third time that I've done this tutorial over the years. I try to update it as the operating system gets updated. Now I'm going to frame things from the perspective of a Windows user because I know there are a lot of Windows users that are first coming to Mac, and it will be easier if I kind of explain things, how they are on Mac compared to how they are on Windows. But this tutorial should be helpful even if this is the first time that you have ever used a computer. I do want to say that I'm going to be going into quite a bit of detail and talking about pretty much all of the main features of macOS, so do remember to rewind, fast forward, use the table of contents, take a break, and to follow along on your own computer because I'm going to be customizing things on my desktop that you might want to customize as well. So without further ado, let's move on over to macOS. Okay, so here we are on macOS, and I've actually created a brand new user account, so it should look pretty similar to what you're working with. But it does depend on what version of Mac you're running, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. This presents an opportunity for me to show you a very important area here in macOS, and that is up here at the top left we have this Apple menu. And if you click on it, you'll notice that we have a bunch of different options in here, and this is kind of like clicking on the Start menu in Windows, but these are really just the core functions of Mac, so we're not accessing our applications and things like that from here. We are restarting our computer. We are shutting it down, we're sleeping it, and we can also access our system settings, which is essentially the control panel on Windows, and we are definitely going to go in there and take a look, but just not quite yet. We're going to look at a few other things on the computer first, but what I want to look at right now is this About This Mac option, because what this does is it tells me everything about my Mac, so it tells me about the hardware of my computer, but you'll notice down here at the bottom it says macOS, and you can see that I'm running Ventura 13.2.1. So that's the current version of macOS. And if you're running an older version of Mac, I have those two other tutorials that I've produced over the years, and I'll put a link to them in the description of this video on YouTube. So if you have an older version, those tutorials might be more helpful. And this tutorial right here should be relevant for years to come because there won't be updates to the operating system that are going to completely change everything. Apple does do things quite subtly. So hopefully this will be relevant to you even in the future. Now, that's how we can find out about our computer. But let's go ahead and let's close this out. And we can close out Windows on Mac just by going to the top left and clicking on this red X. So that's how we can close out that window. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in depth when we start looking at files and folders on our computer and that sort of thing. So just to recap real quick, we can access the Apple menu by going to the top left, and these are where you have those important options like sleep, restart, shut down, and then of course your system settings, which we'll look at in a little bit. But right now I want to talk about a really cool feature here on Mac, and it's called Spotlight. It's essentially like Windows search. So in Windows, you go to the Start button and then you can search, and it will kind of search your whole computer. Well, we have that on Mac as well, but it's up at the top right. It's this magnifying glass. And if you click on it, it will allow you to search your entire computer. For those of you who like keyboard shortcuts, the keyboard shortcut to open up Spotlight is Command spacebar. So I'm just going to do that now. You can see Command spacebar, open Spotlight search right up, and this searches for anything on the computer. So I can search for files, folders, documents, applications, movies, music, whatever I'd like. So let's go ahead and let's search for, say, Safari. So you'll notice that when I search for Safari, a whole bunch of results appear, and the one that I'm looking for is right here at the top. So Safari is Apple's web browser. And I'll be honest with you, I actually don't use Safari on Mac. I use Google Chrome. I like being able to use the same web browser across all of my devices, so Mac, PC, Android, iOS. I like that it syncs with my Google account and all that sort of thing. But I do recommend if you're first using Mac, that you do start with Safari just to check it out and see if you like it. And if you don't, you can download something like Google Chrome and Firefox, and I will show you how to do that later on here in the video. But for now, we've just searched for Safari, and I do want to show you that if you're not seeing what you're trying to find here, you can scroll all the way to the bottom, and you could select this option that says Search in Finder, and it will bring up a window that will allow you to look for that file on your computer. But I'm not going to do that right now because I want to kind of show you how to use Finder a little bit more subtly than just jumping right in through Spotlight like this. But this is how you can search for things on your computer, and we will talk about creating folders and organizing things, but quite honestly, when I need to find something on my Mac, I just search for it. Pretty much, even if I have a folder structure, I search for it, and then if I can't find it, then I go into my folder structure. So that is how you can use Spotlight here on Mac. The next thing I want to talk about is probably something that you've already noticed. On the bottom of our screen, we have this toolbar, and this has all sorts of applications that we can use. So I'm just going to briefly go through some of these. Finder allows us to find files and folders on our computer, and we're going to work with Finder a little bit later on, but essentially it's kind of like Windows Explorer. Finder is always running on your computer. If Finder isn't running, you won't be able to see anything. It's what controls how things are visually shown to you in terms of your files and folders. So you use Finder when you're managing your files and folders, and we'll look at that here in a little bit. But you'll notice that even with no applications open, at the very top left, it still says Finder here on my desktop. And I will tell you that whatever your active application is here on Mac will be listed up here at the top. So if we were in Safari, it would say Safari right here. So just by being here in Mac, you can tell that Finder is open because it will never say anything other than Finder unless there's another application open. If you have no applications open, it's always going to say Finder because that is the default application. Okay, and I know that seems like a long explanation, but that is important. It's a really important concept to get when we talk about using macOS, is understanding how Finder works, okay? But we will get into that a little bit more in depth here in a little bit. Launchpad gives you a quick way to access some of your applications. Safari is Apple's web browser. We talked about it. You can do iMessage here on your Mac. So if you have an iPhone and you're doing iMessage like that, instead of using your phone, you can just type on the computer. Really nice and easy. This is Apple's Mail app. You can set up really any email account you'd like with that. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. I like having my email in a browser. I use Gmail, or if I'm using not a Gmail address, I still use a web mail app instead of having one downloaded on my computer. But a lot of people do like Apple Mail. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check it out, open it up and check it out. You have access to Apple Maps here. Obviously, your photos, that will be important if you have an iPhone or an iPad where you're taking photos with it. You can upload them to your computer, edit them, organize them, all of that sort of thing. You can do FaceTime on your computer, okay? You have access to Apple's calendar system. That actually does work pretty well. I do use Google because I use most of the other Google apps as well, but it is one of those type of apps for Apple that actually functions pretty well. You have your contacts, so if you have an iPhone, you'll have all your contacts here on your computer. Makes it easy to FaceTime them. You can use reminders. You can create notes. It's kind of like stickies. And we have this new application called Freeform, which you really don't have to worry about if you're first getting into Mac, where you can access Apple TV, your Apple Music, Apple News. Now, these three are relatively important. You have access to Keynote, Numbers, and Pages. And these are Apple's default word processing applications. So Pages is equivalent to Microsoft Word, Numbers is equivalent to Excel, and Keynote is equivalent to PowerPoint. I will say I don't really use Numbers and Pages. Well, hold that thought. I don't use Numbers because I use Google Sheets usually. Pages I rarely use, but it is nice if you're creating flyers and brochures. It's easier to design things than in Word or Google Docs or anything like that. So it is nice for that. Keynote I use every day. I do my YouTube thumbnails in Keynote. It's actually a really awesome design tool. I use it more for kind of designing and organizing text with images than I do actually presentations. But Keynote is super powerful and it is a great application. As we move further over, we have the App Store, so that's obviously important. And when you first turned on your computer, it probably went through this setup process, which I recommend you just go through. And it asked you if you wanted to sign in with your Apple account. So if you did, you can click right on this App Store and you'll be able to go in. If you haven't logged in with an Apple account yet, you'll need to log in with an Apple account or create one to go into the App Store. And it might even require that you enter a credit card. It doesn't mean you're going to be charged anything. You know how it works, right? On mobile devices. It is if you do buy something that costs money, they can charge you right away. But if you just download the free apps, you're not going to get charged. And then we also have access to our system settings down here in the toolbar as well. And then this app is my recording app that I'm using right now. And we also have access to our downloads. So by default, when you download a file from the internet, it's going to go to the downloads folder. We can get to downloads through Finder, but we can also just click on downloads right here and it will open that up. And then finally, we have our trash. Now, I will say there are some big similarities between Mac and Windows, in terms of computing. One thing is the right click. When in doubt, you can right click. So for example, if I wanted to empty my trash, you'll notice when I do a right click, I now have the option to empty the trash. And if I were to go to my desktop, I can right click and you'll notice that I have some options. I could create a folder. This desktop will function just like a desktop on Windows. So we can have files and folders and organize things right here on our desktop. It's actually a great workspace, right? So I could create a new folder right here. I could change my wallpaper. So when in doubt, right click. Now, some of you might say, hey, my right click isn't working. So let's take a look at what we can do about that. And really, in addition to that, we're going to go into the system settings for the first time now and start to look around how we can customize things on our Mac. So I'm going to go up here to the Apple menu, and I'm going to click on System Settings. And then from here, this is something that is actually quite different from previous versions of my tutorial because they've made a big update to system settings. It actually used to be called system preferences, first of all, and this whole navigation on the left is new. But a lot of the settings are the same, they just look a little bit different. So obviously, you can kind of go down the list here. If you're having the problem with the right click, you're going to want to go down, you're probably using well, you could be using either a trackpad or a mouse, depending if it's a laptop, but you want to go to either trackpad or mouse, and you want to make sure that your secondary click right here is set to click right side. Okay, so you want to make sure that that is enabled. For a trackpad, there might be a checkbox to enable secondary click. You want to make sure that that is enabled, and then your right clicks will start working. But let's go back up to the top and just kind of go through some of these system settings. So obviously you can connect to Wi-Fi by clicking here and choosing a network. You can connect all of your Bluetooth devices here. You can manage notifications. So if we click on notifications, you'll notice that there are a number of apps down here that are already set to give us notifications. If we get annoyed by them, we can turn them off. And then as we download new apps, they might ask us if we want to receive notifications, and then it would come in here, and this is where we could manage it later on. You have all of your sound settings in here, so what speakers you're using, what microphone you're using, all of that sort of thing. There's a few kind of options in here to customize your display, either when you're doing a lot of work, you don't want to be disturbed, or if you want to limit your screen time, you can look at a report on your screen time. Those are kind of minor features. There's quite a few things here in the general section though. So if we look at general, this is where we could do any software updates. And if there are software updates for your computer, you'll usually see a little red dot somewhere here in the system settings that says like 1 update or 2. So it'll kind of let you know. This is where we can look at how much storage we've used. So you can see I'm using almost 1 terabyte of 3 terabytes. So you can kind of look in there and try and find what's taking up a lot of space on your computer. You can customize your AirDrop settings. So for those of you who are new to Mac, if you have an iPhone, you can send files, photos, videos, whatever from your iPhone to your Mac real quick using AirDrop. You just share the photo on your iPhone. You have to make sure AirDrop is turned on and that you're logged into the same accounts, or at least have the settings set in a certain way that you can use it. And you can just drop those files right to your computer. Actually, when I'm finished recording, this is actually being recorded on an iPhone. I'm just going to AirDrop that to my computer and then edit it. And that's where you can manage your settings for AirDrop. I know you're used to this if you're coming from Windows, your startup items, right? You have to go into, you used to have to run like a command line code to get into the right area to modify all of your startup items. I think it's a lot easier now on Windows, but here it is on Mac. It also used to be difficult on Mac as well. So you can see in here, I don't have any applications that are set to start when my computer logs in, but I do have some applications that are allowed to run in the background. So I could say, I don't really even use Zoom. So I could go to disable it, and it's asking me for my computer password. This is like the administrator password, so I can just enter that, and it will disable allowing Zoom in the background. Let's go back here to general. Obviously, you can customize your language, region, date, time, all of that sort of thing. If you're doing a backup with Time Machine, this is where you would manage that. Moving down here, you've got all of your appearance options, so you can kind of customize how things look on your desktop. Do you want to use a light, dark theme? Do you want it to change based on the lighting in the room? So there's all sorts of options like that. All of your accessibility options are here. Privacy and security options. So this has to do with like location services. So if you want to check what apps are requesting your location, that sort of thing, you can look in there. I really recommend that you all come in here on your own time as well and take a look at these system settings. You're not really going to break anything, and it's just going to help you learn about your computer more because you'll be able to see what's possible. I'm not going to go through every single setting with you right now. I don't think you would want me to do that. So just kind of looking at some of the more important ones. Desktop and dock. So this is something that we're actually going to change here. So you'll notice that right now we have our dock at the very bottom of the screen, and I personally don't like it to always be up like that. So I like to select this option that says automatically hide and show the dock. And you'll notice that when I do that, it's now hidden on the screen, but if I mouse over it, it pops up. So that's my preference. I'm going to turn it back on for just a second because I'm going to show you, let's see, wrong one. I'm going to show you a few other settings here. So notice we could change the size of the dock. So if you get a lot of applications on it, and I'll show you how you can add applications, you might want to make it smaller so you can fit more applications. but you can also specify magnification. So if I mouse over it right now, you'll notice that nothing changes. But if I turn magnification on and I mouse over it, you'll see that it kind of zooms in a little bit. So that's up to you as well. Again, I'm going to make it so that the dock automatically hides. And you'll notice that there are some other options in here as well. This is where you could change, if you scroll down a little bit, your default web browser. So if you wanted to switch it to Google Chrome, you could do that. I do have it installed on this computer. You won't have that in there yet. I just haven't used it on this user account. So there's some things in there. You can customize your displays here. So this is where you can change your resolution. And I'll give you a little bit of a tip here. If you right click on one of these little squares, you can select this option that says show list, and it will give you a list of resolutions. I really wish Apple would just make this default. They try and kind of make it look a little prettier. So you just click on the different options, but here you can actually see the resolution. So you could, change it to whichever you'd like. But I think that's a helpful tip for a lot of people. A lot of advanced Mac users don't even know about that. So that should help you getting started. And this is where you can also adjust your brightness, color profile, all of that sort of thing. You can change your wallpaper over here as well. So you can select one of these kind of default wallpapers that they have. But what you could do is you could go down here to the add folder button, and you could add a folder to some photos on your computer. I don't have anything on this user account yet. And then you could, put custom wallpapers, but you can also do it just by right clicking, remember, to change wallpaper, just right clicking on the desktop and then change wallpaper. So that's kind of easier to do it that way. You can manage your, screensaver, energy saver, other things in here, obviously your keyboard and mouse options. That might be important. Oh, there's one thing with the mouse that kind of annoys me, as you'll notice, and it might annoy you, and I do want to mention this, is you'll notice that right now I'm trying to scroll up, at least the way I do it. I'm pushing up on my mouse, but it's opposite in Mac, so I have to scroll down for it to go up. So to change that, we can go to this natural scrolling option and we can turn it off. And to me, that is how I scroll naturally. So that might, if you're coming from Windows, I think that might bother you because I'm not sure what the default is on Windows. Well, that's how you can change that. Okay, so again, system settings, we've modified a few things in here, but obviously you can look through more of that on your own. Now what I want to talk about is I want to talk about Finder. I've kind of been putting it off a little bit. I wanted you to get comfortable here in Mac and see how things look a little bit, but now it's time. Let's learn about Finder. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go down here to the toolbar on the bottom, the dock, and I'm going to click on Finder. And you'll notice that when I do that, a window pops up. And again, this is kind of like using Windows Explorer, where you're just kind of looking through your computer. And you'll notice that right here it says Recents. So if I had used any recent documents, they'd be listed in here. But I also have access to some other areas here on the left. So I could access the Applications folder. And you'll notice that I do have quite a few things in here. Yours might look a little bit different than this, and I will show you why. First of all, I'm going to sort it by name. So I just clicked on the name column and it's sorted by name. It was previously sorted by date modified. But then I'm also going to change my view. So up here at the top, we have these different view options. I believe the default is icon view, where it looks like this, which for applications, I actually kind of like that view. You can see the little icons and you can choose the one that you'd like. So obviously you can look through your applications now on your own and maybe open some up and see what they do. There's a ton of cool applications here on Mac. But talking about the views, so the second view is the list view, which is I think what we were first in. I definitely like this when I'm looking at folders that have files within them and maybe even other folders within them. I do prefer this view. Some people like this other view for that, which you're not going to see very well, but I kind of call this hierarchy view. And there is a folder in here. There's a utilities folder. So if we click on a folder in here, utilities, you'll notice now we see everything within the utilities folder. And if there was another folder in this folder, we could click and then we would see everything within that folder over here. And this is actually a very Mac view. I think this is one of their original views, and it is very useful. I do use it quite a bit. So that is something that you might want to think about. And then the fourth view is gallery view. This is good when you're looking at images and videos. You can just kind of use your arrow keys on your keyboard and you can arrow through all of these different, right now, applications, but they would be whatever files we're looking at. So let's go ahead and let's go back to icon view for now. One other thing that I want to mention is when you're looking at files on your computer, if you're looking at especially an image, if you just click on an image or an application, so we can just click on this chess app, and then you just hit the spacebar, no, other key, just spacebar. If it's an image or a video, it'll actually pop up as a preview, and the video will actually play. And you'll notice that for an application, it gives us information about that application, what version it is, how large it is, when it was last modified. We could share it from here. We could open it from here. But again, this works really nice with images because you can just kind of see the preview if it's too small in the thumbnail to know exactly which image you're looking at. So if you're looking to access an application, go ahead and come in here to the Applications folder. Now the Desktop folder. This is actually just another way of looking at our desktop over here. So this is the same on Windows. You can move files on your desktop, or you can go through Windows Explorer and you can modify your desktop. So why don't we create a folder? So I'm just going to right click here in Finder, looking at the desktop in Finder, and I'm going to right click and click New Folder. And we'll just call this Test Folder. And you'll notice that when I do that, it also shows the folder here on my desktop. It's the same folder. We're just looking at it from two different perspectives right now. Again, you can also do that on Windows, so it's very similar in that sense. So, we can play with files on our desktop. If you like to organize your things on your desktop, then you can just start creating folders and you can just put everything there. That's fine. You also have access to this Documents folder, and that's all it is. It's just a folder called Documents. There's nothing really special about it other than that. So you can put whatever you want in here. You cannot use it. I tend to keep the files that I'm currently working with, like in the current week, maybe, on my desktop, and then I gotta stuff everything else in that Documents folder and try and organize it when I get a chance. Let's not talk about it. Anyways, that's where the Documents folder is. Again, you can create subfolders within there. We also have the Downloads folder. So by default, when you download a file from a web browser like Safari or Chrome, it's going to go to the Downloads folder. So if you're looking for something you can't find that you downloaded, you tried Spotlight, right? You still can't find it, you might want to check in the Downloads folder. Now you'll notice that there's a couple of things over here on the left in these locations. iCloud Drive allows you to store files in iCloud, so you can keep them backed up. You can access them from anywhere, kind of like a Google Drive sort of thing. And then Boot Camp, I actually have a Windows installation on my Mac using Boot Camp, which you can do as well if you go into your Applications folder and then you go to Utilities, which we kind of looked at earlier. There are a bunch of awesome utilities in here, and you can use what's called Boot Camp Assistant to install a Windows partition on your computer, and you can switch back and forth. It's a full Windows installation. I use it every day. I go back and forth, and it works great. So that's a really great option here on Mac. But this, when I'm looking over here at Boot Camp, I'm actually looking at that partition on my computer. So you won't see that on your computer, and there's nothing for you to really do when you're on Mac. That's just so that I can run Windows. So I just wanted you to know what that is. But I do want to customize a few things and show you a few other locations here in Finder and on Mac. So first of all, notice that while being in Finder, we have a bunch of drop-down menus here at the top. And this is going to be the same in pretty much any application you open in Mac. In Windows, a lot of times you have to hit, I guess you do have the file menu, but nowadays it's often the three dots on the side. Even if you have the three dots on the side in Mac, you will always have the application name in this menu at the top. Always, always, always. So anyways, you can click on Finder and you could, go to About Finder. But if we go to Settings, we can customize certain settings of Finder. And this is something that I think is helpful for new users. One thing that I like to do is I like to check this checkbox that says Hard Disks. You'll notice that when I do that, it now shows my two hard drives over here on my desktop. So I have my Macintosh and my Boot Camp hard drive. And that to me just kind of makes me feel a little more grounded, because if I ever need to find something and I don't want to use Spotlight, I don't want to, sometimes when you click on Finder and it takes you to the Recents location, you're kind of like confused as to really where you are. So if you just double click on your hard drive, you are at like the very basic level of your computer. It's like going to the C drive on Windows, right? So now you can start from the beginning and you can kind of look through, okay, let me try this file path. No, that's not where I want to go. Generally, you're going to be going into the users folder. You're going to find your current user. You'll notice mine actually has a house on it because that's the user that I'm currently logged in with. This is called my home folder. And within my home folder, you'll notice that I have desktop documents, which we've already looked at over here on the left. We already looked at downloads. We have a few other files too: movies, music, and pictures. Guess what? They're folders. They're just folders. You can use them for whatever you'd like. You can put pictures in the movies folder if you'd like, but you might have noticed they're not listed over here on the left. I can actually click and I could drag them to put them in over here on the left. And you can do this with custom folders as well. So we created a test folder earlier. If I grab that off the desktop, I can go ahead and I can drag it over here as well. This feature I do use because there are certain folders that I access all the time that are kind of buried within other folders. So I can just move them here to the side of Finder, and I can just open up Finder and boom, I'm in that folder. So that is definitely a very useful feature. Let me just pull these Finder settings back up here. Connected servers might be a good one to also add in there. If you're remotely connecting to any servers, they would then appear on your desktop. So again, you could go in and access those files. You'll notice that you can change what the new Finder window shows. So instead of showing recents, you could have it show, your basic level hard drive or computer. So this is actually even at a lower level than these two hard drives. Or I could have it open up my documents folder, or maybe just my desktop. Or if you like the recents feature, it will show you files that you've recently used. So that's up to you. A few other things over here. If you go to sidebar, this is where we could also add the music, pictures folders to the sidebar. You'll notice they get added over there to the left. And then under advanced, I like to check this checkbox that says show all file name extensions. Maybe that's just me and I just like to see that, but it'll make it so that now if we have like a docx on our computer, it will say the file name .docx, so we kind of know that it's a docx. So I like to enable that feature, but that's up to you. Notice you can also have the trash automatically emptied after 30 days if you would like. And just a few other options in there. So those are the Finder settings. But if we go back up here to these menus, notice that there's a file menu. And again, this is going to be in pretty much any application you open. So from here, you could open a new Finder window. So this would allow you to have, multiple Finder windows open. So you could, move files from one area to another. I could take this test folder, I could go into desktop, and I could take this test folder and I could drag it into documents, so that allows you to open multiple Finder windows. In here, you can always copy and paste from the edit menu. I think that's kind of similar to on Windows. And a lot of the keyboard shortcuts on Mac are the same as well. So to copy on Mac, it's just Command, and Command is the button on your keyboard that has that infinity knot. So Command and C. On Windows, it's Control C, right? Paste, Command V. Windows, it's Control V. Command A is select all. Command W will close a window. Command R will refresh if you're on the internet. Command T opens a new tab. Command N opens a new window. Command M will minimize the window. You get the idea. It's just substitute Control for Command, and most of them are the same. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, they're pretty much the same. So if we go back up here to these menus again, you'll notice that in the View menu, we could also customize how we're looking at our files and folders in Finder. We could sort things from in here. A few other options. One thing I do want to look at is this Show View options. I kind of wish that this was in the same places when you go to Finder and then you go to the Finder settings, but it's not. So you'll notice that we do have some different view options right here. So we could increase the icon size of our folders and files. We could change the grid spacing, change the text size if it's too small or too large. Kind of some nice little options in there as well. So I did want to show you that area. Just like on Windows, if we want to delete something, we can right click on it, and instead of saying delete, we can say move to trash, and it will send it down to our trash. You'll notice that now there's a little bit of trash shown here in our dock, and we can right click and hit empty trash, and it will delete it forever. Alternatively, just like on Windows, we could just click once on the trash, just a left click, and then we could right click on an item in the trash and select put back, and floop, it will send it right back to our desktop. So now what I want to talk about is I want to talk about using Safari, and we're also going to talk about these little buttons to close and maximize windows. They can be a little confusing on Mac. So I want to use Safari to do that though. So I'm just going to close these. Obviously that red one closes things, right? So to access Safari, we're just going to go down to our dock, and we're just going to click once, left click on Safari, and it opens up. So before we start surfing here with Safari, let's talk about those buttons. So the first button, the red X, will close the window, and I want to spend a second here because it does not quit the application, which is absolutely different than on Windows. If you hit that X on Windows, I'm pretty sure almost all the time, unless it's kind of goes down to the dock, but usually if you hit that X on Windows, it's quitting the application. It's closing it. On Mac, it's just closing the window. To quit out of Safari, we need to go to the Safari menu, or it would be the name of whatever application we're currently in. We're going to go down to quit Safari. Alternatively, we could press Command and Q on our keyboard, and it will quit out of that application. Okay, so that is the difference between hitting the red X and actually quitting an application. Now let's talk about these other two buttons. So the yellow one is pretty self-explanatory, and it is the same as the minimize on Windows. So if we hit this yellow line button, you'll notice that we see the little animation and it goes down to our dock, and it's right here. So this is where it's resting in our dock. If I click on it, it will open back up. Alternatively, if you like keyboard shortcuts, you could press Command and M and it will minimize the window as well. Let's go ahead and open that back up. Now this little green button, Mac has tried to update it over the years, but it honestly isn't the most functional. The best way to use it is what you just saw right there, is to actually mouse over it. And again, this is something that a lot of advanced Mac users don't know about. But if you just click this green button, sometimes it makes it full screen like that, but sometimes it just like puts it on the left side of your screen, and you can kind of see why, because there are those options. When you actually just kind of mouse over the green button, then you can say, do you want to tile it to the left, tile it to the right? I can move it to one of my different monitors if I'd like to. So I often use these options instead of actually just clicking on the green button. Just wait a second and then choose from the list that appears. So those are how those buttons work here in Mac. Now let's talk about Safari. Safari is just like Google Chrome, just like Firefox. To get started, we can go up here and we can either search or enter a website. So I could just go to my website, and you'll notice that it loads up just like it would in any other browser. Now, at the same time, we could just search Google. So instead of entering AnsonAlex.com, I could have just searched for Anson Alex, and you'll notice that it pops up right there. Up here in the top left, we can go back in Safari. We could go forward with this button right here. If we wanted to share a page, we can do it up here at the top right. And we can open a new tab by clicking on this plus icon. But just like in other browsers, we could also press Command T, and you'll notice that a new tab opens up. We could just hit the X right here to close it. We can drag and move the tabs around just like we would in any other browser. Now, let's take a look at some of the options we have up here in the Safari menus. So you'll notice that we can access our settings, and I'm showing you this also because this is the same with pretty much any application. If you ever want to get into an application settings, you go up to the menu with the application name and then click on settings. And you'll notice that in here, we can customize some things about Safari. So when we open up Safari, what do we want to open up? A new window, our windows from the last session, those sort of options that are pretty standard. So you can choose that. A new window opens with the start page. That's that page that we saw that kind of just shows our recently visited areas. So we could say, hey, I want to open up with my home page. And a new tab opens up with maybe an empty page. And then I could change my home page right here. So I could just change it to my website. And you notice that you have some other options in here as well. Remove history items. Notice that you have a whole bunch of other options in here. You can customize how your tabs are displayed, any autofill, so that's autofilling addresses and credit cards, any of passwords that you'd like to save. You can save them here in Safari, just like in other web browsers. You can specify your default search engine. I don't know why you would change that, at least not yet. And you've got some other options as well. In advanced, you might find some things in terms of accessibility and that sort of thing. But those are just some general options. If I ever want to add a new bookmark here in Safari, I can just go up to the bookmarks menu and click on add bookmark. It will ask me where I'd like to add it to. So you can add it to a group called favorites, which will show up on your start page, or you can just put it in the bookmarks folder and click on add. To access your bookmarks, you're just going to go up to bookmarks, and then you can click on show bookmarks, and they will appear over here on the left side of the screen. You could go back up to bookmarks and hit hide bookmarks to then hide them. Now, again, I don't really use Safari anymore, so if you wanted to use another browser, you could simply go and just search for, say, Google Chrome. And it actually took me to the Google Chrome webpage, but you could search for it or just go to, I think it's chrome.google.com. Notice it says download Chrome. So you're just going to click on that. And you're going to click on allow. Obviously, you want to make sure that your downloaded sources are trusted, but there's a little bit less of a chance of getting viruses here on Mac, but it's not ironclad. So notice when we downloaded it, we got a little notification up here. So we could click up here to show our downloads. We also saw that it went down here, and that's because I showed you earlier, our downloads folder is listed here on the bottom, so we can also get it from there. And I want to show you this because I actually have Google Chrome installed, but I want to show you what installing an application on Mac looks like. So we're just going to kind of start installing it over and see what happens. So I'm just going to click on, I actually just like clicking on this magnifying glass because this opens up a Finder window and shows me the location of this file. Notice that it is properly stored away in our downloads folder where we would expect it to go, but just making sure. So now to install this file, any application, an install file on Mac is going to be called .dmg. Okay, so you would double click on the DMG file, and then oftentimes you'll see a screen like this. You might just have kind of a Windows type screen where you hit next and just walk through the instructions. But if you see this, all it wants you to do is just click and drag this folder to the applications. It says, hey, I'm going to, replace one that's already in there because I already have one. You know what? I'm fine with that. So I'll just hit replace. Might have to enter your computer password, administrator password, and it just copies it in there, and that's it. That's how a lot of applications are done on Mac. They don't need to be extracted and installed. They just need to be dragged to the system and it's ready to go. So now if you wanted to use Google Chrome, you could obviously search Spotlight with Command Spacebar, and you could search for Chrome and it will pop right up. You don't even have to use your mouse. You can just hit enter and it will open right up. Or you could go to your applications folder and you could double click on it. But if I just open it up from Spotlight, notice it takes a second since it's the first time I'm opening it. Asks me if I want to set it as default. Sure, why not? And kind of Apple's like confirming, are you sure you want to change your browser? Yeah, I'm sure. I'll use Chrome. Notice that Chrome didn't open up in full screen. So we can drag windows larger on Mac, just like on Windows. You can either go to like a corner and drag it from a corner. You can drag it from an edge, and you can just pull it out like this. Now, here's a feature on Windows that I miss on Mac, but Mac does have an equivalent. So one thing is what I do on Windows is I have multiple monitors, and I have like a window that I want to put on my other monitor. I will just drag it to the top and let go, and it makes it full screen. It's not full screen, but it's maximized. It's the whole window. On Apple, that doesn't work, right? All I have to do is double click on the top bar. Boop. Now it's full screen. Okay, so that's the equivalent here on Mac. But here we are in Google Chrome. Now, a couple things. First of all, if we go down to our dock, you'll notice that we now have this Google Chrome icon, and we have the dot under it because it's telling us that it's open. What we can do is we can right click on this icon, we can go to options, and we can select keep in dock. So that means that even if we quit out of Google Chrome, it will remain in our dock, so we can easily click on it to open it up. If we don't select that, when we quit out of it, it's going to disappear from our bottom dock, and we're going to have to go to the applications folder or search Spotlight to open it back up. So for anything that you're using on a regular basis, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to right click and go to options and say keep in dock. Now, alternatively, there might be things that you're not using in your dock and you can get rid of them. So, like I said, Apple Maps is just not Google Maps, right? So all I have to do is click and drag this off the dock and hold it off the dock and then let go. And you'll notice that it is no longer on my dock. So I could do the same with Apple Mail. Sorry, but I'm just not an Apple Mail guy. Bye-bye. And you'll notice on my Mac, my user account, my dock is completely customized in terms of the applications. I basically clear all of them off. I mean, I don't use the calendars. I don't need contacts. You do have to hold it off the dock for a second, notice. But I don't use the contacts. I don't use reminders, notes. But now here you are in Chrome. You know how Chrome works. I'm not going to give you a tutorial on how to use Chrome. Remember, if we just hit this X, notice that Chrome is still in the menu bar, so we haven't quit out of it. We've just closed the window. We'll notice that there's a red dot under Chrome as well still. So I can go up to Chrome and I can quit Chrome. And I can start cleaning up some of this. So I can close out these windows. I'm not going to be using Safari. So I now clicked on the browser to get into Safari. Now I can go and I can quit out of Safari. And now one thing I can do is I have this little drive on my desktop that was used to install Google Chrome. I don't need that anymore. That's kind of like the install file. So I can go ahead and I can hit eject Google Chrome after right clicking, and that will get that off my system. That's how you can get rid of a flash drive and all of that sort of thing as well. Just a couple last things before I let you explore on your own. Notice that there are some different options up here in the top right. So this is where we can see the time, the date, but we also have this Wi-Fi symbol here. And if we click on Wi-Fi, we can quickly manage, what Wi-Fi network we're connected to and all of that sort of thing. So I hope you all found this video helpful. What I would recommend if you're just starting on Mac is go ahead and customize your dock, get the applications down there that you're going to use, get the other ones off of there, and then start thinking about how you're going to want to store your files. So maybe you use the documents folder, create a couple of subfolders in there, then go into Safari or Chrome and maybe download something from like Google Drive or some sort of file on your computer and kind of put it in a folder and organize it and just start to kind of get comfortable. But things are very smooth on Mac. At the end of the day, it works very similar to Windows. Once you learn these it's almost like speaking a different language. We're still communicating kind of in the same way, but you just have to know what it looks like or what it sounds like. So again, I hope you all found this video helpful. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up here on YouTube And if you want to see more technology tips and tutorials, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's all I have for you for today. It was a lot, I know. This is Anson from AnsonAlex.com.